much. Hi, everybody. So I find it interesting that the chat that's been going on during the conference has been really interesting, looking at what people are talking about. And they're talking about AGI, something that doesn't exist, something that might exist in the future, but it doesn't actually exist. Yet in our jobs, like what people pay us money to do, they ask us to create real things with tangible outcomes. And if I told my boss, here's what you asked for, it's probably going to work in 10 years, but it may not be real, they probably wouldn't pay me. So that's kind of the stage that we're at now. We're trying to like bridge science fiction with reality and try to understand how it all works together. So I want to talk about some of the things that have been going on in AI over the past little while and looking at maybe some of the ideas that are coming out this year that people are talking about or thinking about, and maybe some of the ideas behind it. So thank you, Priyanshi, for the introduction and all the students who have been doing a really fantastic job sharing all the different panels and introducing everybody. Today, at the end of the session at 3 to 4 p.m. Mountain, we're going to have a discussion with all the organizers, and we're going to talk about what we put together, what's happening in AI and what the ideas are. And we've been working on many interesting research projects that intersect the things we've been talking about over the past couple days. So let's take a look at the state of AI. I kind of thought it would be interesting to look at where we are and what's been happening. I should point out that most of these images I generated with AI, which means that they're pretty much terrible, and all of them have spelling mistakes. So I know AI is not perfect, and I think this is a very good metaphor for what's going on right now, right? Because despite the fact that it works very well sometimes in some cases, it doesn't work very well in all cases for all times. And quite often, if their model is trained on terrible garbage, we end up getting terrible garbage back, but at scale. So, I think the amazing thing about what's been happening with AI, particularly generative AI, is that for the first time, people are really really interested in what was a very niche area in computer science. So there's different kinds of AI that's been around for a very long time. For example, there's been things like supervised learning, unsupervised learning. So we tell the computer basically what kind of data we have. We have machine vision. We have all sorts of different branches. Rules-based systems have been around since the 70s. But what's really changed, what's really fundamental, is that now we have the ability to look at these very large patterns of words and the processing power to make it happen. And we could start to take this technology and look into the future. So when the original Star Trek came out, people talked to a computer and the computer talked back. That was amazing. That was like a game changer. But you can do that today, right? That's actually possible. So if we say, okay, let's extrapolate all the different possibilities of what could happen in the future, what does that look like? There's some pretty amazing things that we're able to develop. And we want to think about like what's possible, how does it actually scale? If anything, we've had a massive acceleration in software and public interest in AI, so much so that unlike many other hype cycles and technologies, you simply just have to type something in and it actually works. That's it. It's just a very easy, low barrier to entry technology. And the other side is the hardware, like how does the processing actually work? And we haven't really accelerated in that direction yet. There really aren't very many AI chips that are meant for specially processing AI, but that's coming in the future. Once we can offload large data processing from server farms and move those into your fridge or microwave or smart device, then it's going to completely change the way that we use AI. In this idea, when I was at Google I/O recently, something that really struck me wasn't the amazing things that they announced. It was the very simple things like pick up your phone and tell your phone to text the last 3 people that you talked to. Something like really simple that you'd think a phone can do, but that's not actually possible today, right? Tell your microwave what you're actually making, and it will microwave for the right number of minutes. So if you have the ability to build some type of intelligence into these systems, then using patterns, it can figure things out. The problem is that the models that we have today, the frontier models, are the largest possible models that are supposed to encompass all of human knowledge for all reasons, and even smaller models like Llama comes in different flavors specifically for generating text, generating code, solving problems, creating cat pictures, and so on, right? So we're using essentially computerized sledgehammers, like the biggest, strongest possible tool to solve very small, very easy to solve problems by using massive tools. And what that means is that there's very poor scale of economy. I always talk about this idea that if you teach somebody Excel, they could learn Excel once, create a sheet, and then use it over and over again for the next 30 years. And there's only one unit of input cost to making that spreadsheet. Now, just extrapolate what that looks like with something like ChatGPT with generative AI. I can keep on asking it to make me a spreadsheet, but I have to essentially pay for that unit of processing, electricity, etc., over and over again exponentially every time I use it for the next 30 years. That's not a cost savings, that actually costs more. And if we look at a lot of processing, there is now starting to come out, for example, cached queries. So for example, I ask it to write me some code, build me an answer, make me a cat picture, and the system will save that and prioritize that saved image in the future as opposed to creating something completely new, which saves a lot of power, a lot of processing, and ultimately cost from what we're doing right now. So we're at the very, very beginning of AI and it really taking off. I think that so many people are investing in it and talking about it because it's new and very accessible. And over time, we're going to start seeing new technologies that take advantage of what we're developing now, even within the next 2 or 3 years. Um, so there's a lot of different issues that have come up around AI and its use, which I think are very interesting. One thing that struck me recently from a conference was access and equity. Access and equity in terms of, we like, for example, the classic thing is you talk to somebody at a school and they say, we're going to look at catching students cheating on essays. And the essay says it across the top, um, you know, I can't write you an essay because I'm an AI, and they just hand that in. Like very terrible student work. The question is, are the people who are getting caught cheating because they're handing in English essays that ChatGPT is generating, are those people with access to a lesser free model as opposed to people with fancier, more expensive models? And are we creating like a model class system where some people are spending more money and have access to better and fancier tools, and people who don't are going to be left with the terrible, models that don't work very well, and that will create an equity issue. Now, this is actually true on the other side, in the academic side, because unlike many other technologies, universities can't afford the AI hardware that you need to do this kind of research. So a place like OpenAI has tens of thousands of times more processing capacity and very fancy computers than somewhere like Stanford University. And in universities, the tools that we use for research are actually being leased or rented from the biggest cloud companies like Google, Amazon, and Microsoft, all of whom are making money on AI research. So it's really shifted, like the ability to buy a computer and put it in a server farm in your office at a university and to do research. That's only one unit, but some of these AI companies have 10,000 or 100,000 times that. And they're using these systems to build the next version of research. So you see a lot of research papers coming out that are on the company side as opposed to the university side. And I think that's been something very interesting too, because this kind of technology, especially generative AI, takes an enormous amount of processing power. So whether it's happening at the student level, the administrator level, and so on, we need to really look at who has access to which models or which technologies and what does it mean for how they do their job. I was at a meeting recently where somebody said, well, if my school is expecting me to use AI to teach, are they going to pay for it? And that's a good question. There's not that many students in North America, not that many schools in North America that have paid for all their faculty to have AI tools. But at the same time, every student has heard about ChatGPT. I was sitting in a cafeteria, and the students at the next table were trying to solve a problem, a web coding problem with ChatGPT. Something I knew the answer to, so I could just go over and tell them the answer. But I decided to do an experiment and just sit there eating my lunch and watch what happened. And basically, the students had Visual Code on Studio Code on one screen, and they had ChatGPT on the other, and they copy paste, copy paste, copy paste, copy paste, and they keep on saying, "It's not working. What do I do?" Copy paste, copy paste. So they literally spent an entire hour. I was there for about 55 minutes, not solving the problem, but going in this huge circular loop of trying something, it doesn't work, trying something else, it doesn't work. So we do have the collected knowledge of everything that's in Stack Overflow and many other sites. But if you go to Stack Overflow, there's usually 20 wrong answers and one comment at the very bottom, that's the right answer. And that's the way to move forward. So it really comes down to, yes, there's a lot of collected knowledge, but without the wisdom to put that together, it doesn't really mean very much. So there are some amazing technologies that are happening with AI and inclusion. So like new programs like Microsoft Copilot for Windows, where you could talk to your computer and it opens Windows and does things. There's an amazing new technology from Google called Project Game Face, where you could use your facial expressions. You don't even have to touch your phone. Just with your facial expressions, it understands what you're trying to do and how your eyes and face are moving. It controls your phone. And I think that these kinds of technologies are going to enable people to use AI or use their technology in new ways that maybe they weren't able to before. So I think in terms of accessibility, like how can we actually use our devices, marrying the idea of accessible technology along with new advances in machine vision mean that we have access, like people who have never had access to technology before are able to use it. There's been a lot of talk on regulation and compliance, where they passed the EU AI Act. The US Senate is talking about AI. And I find that really interesting. So the EU, which already has very strong privacy regulation, they went and they implemented what you can do with AI, what's ethical, and so on. And the US, the conversation is around AGI. Like, for example, in JS's presentation, there was all these slides about how AI is going to end the world. And essentially, people are talking about Terminators, but at the same time, students are using that to generate cat pictures, and this is the same technology at the same time, right? Now, the really interesting thing about this is that people are worried about AGI and they're talking about what companies can do with technology, but at the same time, there's no privacy or data regulations for many places in the US. So that means that these things are happening simultaneously. Like, yes, we want to vacuum up and use all of your data to feed our AI systems, but on the other hand, we're not interested in more privacy regulation. So it's kind of a trade-off between those two things. Like, how do AI systems work if they're not using massive amounts of data? But is that massive amounts of data being gathered ethically? Are they asking people's permission, or are they just taking it? And despite the fact that they have enormous amounts of data, we're actually not yet reading AI generated books and we're not watching AI generated movies because it's not very good. Students at my university took every Christmas movie that had ever been made, combined the scripts, and generated the ultimate Christmas movie, which was terrible, much more terrible than a regular Christmas movie. It had every problem in every movie inside of it. And just because it's possible, we're still very far away from replacing people. If anything, these are tools to help people's productivity, but not necessarily to replace the work that they're doing. So there's been many new, I picked some of the new developments, but there's been many of them. It's in the news practically every day. We have things like new ChatGPT models. ChatGPT reached 100 million users. DeepMind and Gemini came out from Google. So there's a whole bunch of new advancements, including multimodal. The EU's AI Act, Anthropic's Claude has, new kinds of programming to adjust the answers of how it comes out, although Anthropic is not doing great financially. Meta came out, that should be Google came out with Gemini. And multimodal is a really huge thing because you're able to put in text, video, images, all these things together to understand. And I saw a really amazing demo at Google where I put in a video of an apartment and I said, estimate not only the square footage of each room, but also tell me what the colors are in each room using web-safe colors. And then take all that information and build me a blueprint. And it actually did it, which was amazing. Like based on what it saw in the video, it was able to create a blueprint in real life. And based on that, just imagine the possibilities and go in so many more directions. You can do things like text to video, like from Sora and Vue. That doesn't really exist yet and relies on complex physics and many other things, but I think eventually that will be a thing. I'm not 100% sure. And there's new LLMs for code that are coming all the time, building new and interesting ways to interact with people. But if you look at Project Devin, which recently had huge public failures, just because you could, create the same steps as a software developer, people still have to think critically about what they're doing. And if they don't, it will make it very difficult to put those together. So there's many new things in entertainment. People are worried about deepfakes. There's been a lot of lip syncing, content generation. So although people are worried about, AI writing the stories that they write and writing scripts and so on, they're still using like AI generated storyboards. As they type, the images of their story are appearing. There's special effects, which have always been used, right? So people are, using AI technologies to build movies for a very long time. There's many ethical concerns about the data that goes into AI systems, as well as how it's used. There's been, robocalls recently in politics that were AI generated. AI is vacuuming up enormous amounts of data without permission. These are all issues of how it impacts humans. And that's an example of the writer's strike where, there was all this controversy around how AI is going to be used. Now that we're going to an election year in the US, there's a lot of AI-generated disinformation. There's been studies recently that came out that said AI disinformation isn't very good. People don't believe it very often. And I kind of feel like we're going to start approaching AI content, maybe not today, but in the future, kind of like spam. So when you get a terrible spam message that tells you, you won $10 million, usually people just delete it. And we're going to start to discriminate between like authentic and real authenticity and, spammy images that don't really look real. In the future, that might improve. But again, to go to the next level requires the next level of processing as well as both hardware and software, which doesn't exist yet. There's been tons of innovation in AI healthcare, looking at things like diagnostics, personalized medicine, treatment plans, many, many projects happening here in Alberta, but across the world, looking at how AI can leverage and provide better data, especially in analytics for healthcare. So a lot of really interesting new kinds of AI. Cybersecurity as well, because if you think about it, if you have this ability to do good things at scale, you could probably do bad things at scale, and this cybersecurity Cold War gets even more so with AI. I recently heard about a university program that doesn't teach people how to code. It teaches people how to use all these different cybersecurity tools. So I said, like, I don't understand how, like, if the other people know how to code, they could change and that would be a problem. They're like, no, we built cybersecurity LLMs that you could ask any question about cybersecurity and it tells you what to do, which I found really interesting because now you have a robot telling a person how to defeat a robot driven by another person type of thing. Robotics has taken a huge acceleration too because of AI. And instead of having robots that are very difficult to program and very difficult to put together, now we have new technologies that are able to program robots with just a prompt and say, like, pick up that item, and it would go through all the steps for training and so on, all packaged into one very easy to use application. I put this slide in because I've been asked a lot, I think 3 times this week, about AI and quantum computing, which doesn't exist. And I thought it's interesting that people are asking, like, it seems like a good idea, and quantum computers are meant to solve quantum problems, and quantum states could potentially solve certain problems much more efficiently than regular linear programming. But at the same time, quantum and LLMs don't intersect, at least not for the next 10 or 20 years. So I find it interesting that there's a lot of talking about it. Someone asked me to give a talk about it, and I said it's not a real thing. So, the fact that people are thinking in this direction is very interesting and probably hasn't happened for quite a while, right? Where people are conflating the technology and at the same time looking at both the use cases and what it's doing. I mean, AI has generally been slow to be taken up by industry. And that's something that's very interesting because unlike the previous hype cycles, whether it was the metaverse or NFTs or cryptocurrency or something, a lot of businesses jumped into that very quickly. And now companies are really looking at value and they're saying, okay, this amazing new technology exists. How do we plug this into our business in a way that makes sense and scales and makes money? And the answers to that aren't really clear. People are talking about AI and machine brain interfaces. There's some really amazing programs now that utilize AI to understand how people are thinking, looking at neural activity and so on. I think it was Oregon passed a law that your brainwaves are protected, privacy data. So they have a hat that truckers can wear that looks at their brainwaves. And when it starts detecting sleep brainwaves, even if they're sitting and they look awake, it automatically does a process that the AI starts talking to them and tells them to wake up or pull over and stuff like that. And there's a lot of privacy considerations that goes with these technologies at the same time, right? The potential for people discriminating against you based on biological factors or even like thought patterns and things like that are now theoretically possible because we have much more advanced ways of looking at that data using AI as well as bio tracking. And there's tons of ethical considerations in AI. Where does the data come from? Is the data biased? People like saying, for the past 30, 40 years, we've been collecting data, and now suddenly we have to analyze it. The problem with this, however, is that now we have such an enormous amount of data, all that data may be biased in the way that we collected it and the type of data that it contains. So for example, if we've discriminated against people for 30 or 40 or 100 years, And now we're using that data to be objective and value free and neutral to for the future. Of course, it's going to make biased decisions because it's built on what happened in the past. So we really need to think of new ways to look at bias, increase transparency, and have better accountability. We've had government guidelines saying that high risk AI applications, like for example, jobs, age discrimination, gender discrimination, and many others have a human in the loop and are not mediated by AI because AI can't take into account what's actually happening and what are the considerations around that. Facebook had a very famous thing recently with housing. So you have, certain ads for certain apartments don't show to people of certain ages, which is clear discrimination, but there's this gap in between. And with the recent Air Canada decision that Air Canada chatbot, which wasn't AI based, but same kind of idea, told somebody mistaken information, and the courts ordered them that they had to still follow through with what their bot said. When I talk to a lot of companies, they're very worried that if we create an AI bot, especially a generative AI bot, that just makes up information, it might make up the wrong thing, and the company is liable for whatever it says. And of course, that can be very risky. On the flip side, many companies are looking to do exactly this. Use AI wrappers using ChatGPT, build a program that does something, but it uses their technology inside of your company. I think the biggest challenge is that you can't copyright AI and you can't say that it's yours. It's basically just being generated from everybody else's work and it's not considered to be yours. So if you built a company around somebody else's idea, you're essentially beholden to them, whether you're using their API to process data over and over again, or if their technology is core to what you're doing, your company might not have any value. So I mean, it's the end, but we're really at the beginning. We're right at the very, very beginning of what AI can do and how the technology works, but more importantly, how AI is changing society. You have this like prompt where you can type in anything and amazing things happen, and that's never happened before. And as we see each invention or each development in AI, and they get more and more complicated, it starts to really bridge what we're able to do and how amazing this possibility is. But at the same time, sometimes AI does not work with what we're trying to do and is not interested in helping us. And sometimes the AI can't picture it says, no, we're not going to provide that for you. And that creates, I think, a huge limitation in order to what we can do using AI. Thank you very much.